How you doing? My name is James Manley. I'm a professor at Towson University where I teach economics. I'm excited to be part of this conference. I wish I could be there in person. The closest I have, unfortunately, is a mug that I got from Turkey, so I'll be thinking of you and wishing I was there. The work that I'm going to present to you is joint work that was also put together by Malika Dehingia and Zlata, who is hopefully in the room as you're able to see this. This is a project where we've looked through a lot of information about other program effects of cash transfers, mostly on child health, but also on other households in crisis. This paper was created as an initiative of UNICEF and GIZ. We've got information on effects of cash transfers on children. As I said, we've got information on employment, which is obviously an adult outcome, and we've got information on resilience as best we could. So what we've done is we've gone through a very wide search. We looked through literature for studies that had been done previously, quantitatively estimating impacts of cash transfers on outcomes of interest, and again, only in the context of adaptive social protection, again, people who are facing a crisis. We also required that the studies use or find some way to describe a clear counterfactual. We also limited our data to low and middle income countries. Thousands of studies, there were not as many observations on any given outcome as we would like. For my past work, I was looking at all different kinds of social protection and looking to see the effect of cash on height for age Z-scores, and I've got 75 different programs that estimated that. But there's just not as much work that has been done yet on such outcomes in a adaptive social protection context, and so my numbers are going to be much lower here. So here's the story of our search. That we started off with a snowball. We looked at the review studies on the last slide, and then we carried out our database searches, and based on those, we gathered 2,000 total articles to look through. But then by the time that we did the screening of these different at these different levels, first we screened the citations, then the abstracts, and then the full text. We're getting it down to 45 studies in our meta-analysis and 39 in our qualitative narrative review. The papers that we found were grouped in this way. We got most of our papers, I guess there's not a majority, but a lot of those papers came from African locales. Also a fair number from the Middle East, in particular a lot of Syria papers, not people in Syria, but Syrian refugees in places like Jordan or Lebanon. The crisis type also varied to a decent degree, and there's we feel good about the diversity of the different places that are being analyzed. In particular, there are 17 countries just in terms of the different climate crises. So that's kind of a healthy cross section of the world that's being examined. But the other, the displaced people are more. There's less variety in those outcomes. So when we gather our data to do the meta-analysis, here are our results. So height for age Z-score. My previous work on social protection in general, again, not adaptive social protection, but social protection in general, was able to come up with 77 estimates of the impact of cash on child height. And the overall impact, combined meta-analytically, estimates an average impact of about 2.2 z-score points, right? And that is significant, which is comforting. But the one piece of analysis that we learned from doing this ASP research is that when we take that list of 77 and we remove the papers that were ASP, that were a crisis in a crisis context, the overall impact of the straight up social protection, again, not adaptive social protection, ceased to be significant. That the point estimate was still on the plus side, not correct side, but the plus side. But overall, the impact is very marginal. On the other hand, when we look at the ASP estimates grouped by themselves, the overall estimate is significantly larger, right? It's 0.1, basically a tenth of a standard deviation, as opposed to the 0.02 that we were able to see when we grouped all of our non-adaptive social protection programs together. As you can see, there are a couple of programs that did provide a negative impact, but overall, when we combine those results meta-analytically, the results come out positive, with an impact that is significantly larger than the impact that we estimated for all of the non-adaptive social protection programs, which I found was interesting. Weight for height z-score is an important outcome, but we weren't able to find an overall impact. As you can see, the overall combined, the meta-analytically combined estimate is not different from 0. This is the same result as I found in the social protection result. Looking at child dietary diversity, all of our estimates are positive. So every program that tracked child dietary diversity found a positive impact. Whether it was significant or not varied a little bit. We did have one program in Ethiopia that was not significant, although still the point estimate was positive. All the other programs did have a significant impact, and the meta-analytically combined result also was significant, with an impact of about half a food group. So on average, ASP transfer recipients improved their dietary diversity by 0.5 food groups over people who didn't get the transfer. Household dietary diversity is kind of a similar story. We were able to gather a few more data points for this outcome than the last one, but the result is a little bit smaller. So about 0.29 food groups is the estimated impact, whereas before it was about 0.55. So households definitely are improving their diet. I think that's there are a few contrary data points. Again, the Ethiopian study doesn't find a significant impact, and this other search study in Manley didn't show a significant impact, but all the point estimates are positive, and most of them did find a significant impact. And when we combine the estimates meta-analytically, we get about 0.3 of a food group difference between recipients and non-recipients. Next, moving on to look at child labor. Again, in this case, the right side, the correct, the side we're hoping for is to see a decrease in child labor, and that is indeed what we see here in every study. Again, there are varying estimates on how strong it is. Actually, I do have one study here in Nicaragua that didn't find positive results. It was basically a 0 result. All the other, 6 results all found a decrease in child labor. if I remember correctly, the story in Del Carpio is that boys work less, but to make up for that, girls end up doing more domestic work as they have to take care of them, I guess. And so that's one unfortunate situation in Nicaragua, but in all the other places, when under an ASP situation, when cash transfers were available, it did decrease child labor. The results are also promising as far as adult employment. The overall combined estimate is for a 6% increase. Again, we're combining all these different transfers. Some of the transfers are big, some of the transfers are not as big, but as long as there's cash available, that it's not so large that it's keeping people home. These people want to work, and when they have cash to put themselves out there on the job market, it's resulting in an increase in their labor market participation, which is a good thing. School enrollment, you can see there's a little bit of heterogeneity here, a few negative or near zero estimates. But when we combine these results meta-analytically, we find that on average, these 14 studies are associated with a 6% increase in school enrollment. Right, then, so we've talked about employment, we've talked about education, we've talked about nutrition. What about resilience? There's the two ways that I had two ways to measure resilience that I was able to come up with, that I was able to gather enough information on, were number one, cash balances, and number two, asset balances. I'm not sure what the theoretical expectation is here for cash. Obviously, one function of cash is to balance out any kind of a shock. So if you're getting some cash, maybe you'll put it into savings. And if you're putting it into savings, it's not clear where it's going to end up right here. So anyway, I was sort of ambivalent about this, and the results were likewise ambivalent. I don't see that there's a clear impact one way or the other in terms of cash. The meta-analytically combined estimate is for a slight increase, but it's not significant at all. It's very small. The one I was more concerned about is assets. These are, if people are, the question really here is whether people were forced to divest themselves of assets because of the shock that is putting them in the adaptive category. The answer is no. Fewer people were forced to divest themselves of assets. Again, the impacts are in the expected, aka good direction. So out of these 7 studies, again, many of which are from the Middle East, the overall impact is a 3% decrease. So it does prevent households from being forced to divest themselves of assets. So that's a good sign. Finally, so the meta-analytic work is 100% me, and the next part of the paper, I'm just not going to spend too much time talking about, because Zlata, who's with you, will be able to talk more about it. And this work was done by mostly by her and Malika, and they know more about it than I do. But the bottom line is, for studies like this, if I had enough studies on one topic, then I can gather that data and analyze it. But if I don't have enough studies on a given topic, or if they're similar topics but not exactly the same measure, then we group them using narrative analysis instead of using meta-analysis. And so we still really wanted to address these 3 topics. This was part of our mandate to see what we could learn about gender, about mental health, about household resilience, beyond what I was able to do as far as the cash, as far as the assets. But Malika and Zlata were able to take the papers that they could find and combine this information using narrative analysis. On the topic of gender, there were 10 studies. Some talked about violence, some about empowerment and norms, but one very heartbreaking story in India was about cash transfers that protected people from crisis, but in this population where they had used to be, where there were crises from time to time, in the past, if there was because they knew that there was some propensity for a crisis, in these households where there's a chance for this, they were risk averse in terms of investing in a child that was born in a year of plenty. So where there are, if there's heterogeneity in harvest and you'll have a good year and a bad year, the families would choose to invest in whatever child was born in a good year, regardless of whether the child was male or female. But when the transfers were available, they decided that it was no longer important to invest in girls under any circumstances. And so just something to be aware of as a hazard of adaptive social protection. Then as far as mental health studies, in general, most of our impacts were on the positive side. We did see impacts on mental health in these several countries, but there was one case study that saw no effects. And among these 4 studies, again, a few impacts were all positive, but there was one curious case in Liberia where cash plus cognitive behavioral therapy was effective when they were in tandem, but separately, neither one was able to improve mental health. So that was kind of a mildly cautionary tale. Finally, there was a few studies of resilience beyond the cash and assets that I was able to combine meta-analytically. They gathered data on food-related and non-food-related coping strategies. And we saw short-term protective effects in these countries, but the longer-term protection was not well supported. And obviously, when people are in crisis, it's important to bridge the gaps. But the longer-term question is, can we get people on a sustainable path? Can we give people a livelihood strategy that they can then rely on going forward? There's good evidence on other types of coping strategies. But again, the difference is short-term versus long-term. In Niger, public works programs increased investments in agriculture. So there's some learning and some investment happening that's maybe on a long-term trajectory. But in Mexico, again, the overall impact was not large, unfortunately. The conclusion of our paper is that, yes, there's a lot of results that we've found, a lot of impacts that we can chalk up to adaptive social protection, to cash transfers under a crisis context. But in order for them to be workable, again, we take a step back to the theory that says that there are 4 strategies for making sure that these programs work. And all of the, well, not all of these, but most of these rely on having a working social protection to start with. you've got the basis installed, and you're going to be able to expand that in a variety of ways. You can reach out to new people. You can increase the cash that people are already receiving by the amount, or you can, once you have this targeting information, maybe you can have some backup help like the World Food Program to ride to the rescue as well. And so having a working social protection program makes the probability of seeing success in an adaptive context so much better. Another paper, this is just one paper, but it really stood out to me, was by Popel et al. in 2021 in Bangladesh, where transfers were sent in advance of a flood. Technology enabled them to see what was coming and to reach out to people, and that was effective. There was less asset loss. It allowed people to avoid going, hat in hand to a loan shark, and people were more healthy. It was a big success story. So we're excited for the advances of technology, right? Again, using the weather notifications, reaching out to the target population well, and finally being able to send cash electronically made the difference for this group of people. And that's a very promising development. Our conclusions are that impacts were clearer on more obvious outcomes, such as diet, rather than on nutritional status. That's been clear from the social protection. It's also visible in the adaptive social protection. And we do hope to cooperate with UNICEF and GIZ again. Thank you very much for your time. I wish I could be there, but let me now pass it off to Zlata.